Heartcatch Precure is so fucking good. Thus far, Heartcatch Precure is the best season of Precure. It's so good that it justifies the existence of the previous seasons while simultaneously rendering them irrelevant. This season would not exist without every season that came before, so in that sense their existence is justified. But this season is so much better than them that you might as well not even watch the rest and just watch this one. I'm not saying Heartcatch is perfect, nothing is after all, with the exception of this image. This season has its weaknesses, but given the abundance of good stuff in this show, and standing in contrast to previous seasons which had a much more balanced scale of good stuff versus annoyances, the weaknesses of this season, relative to all of that, are almost moot points. This season has so many cool elements, or at least elements that provide good food for thought, that I can't help but want to celebrate its successes. For the sake of balance, if nothing else, I will mention the areas where this season does falter, but for the most part, I want to answer one simple question. How does Heartcatch Precure succeed so hard? But before that, a tiny bit of background. See, Heartcatch Precure is not just any old season of Precure, it's the season. Popular consensus holds this as the best season. It's the most watched season of the series. Its release saw a rise in merchandise sales. The image of its main characters became the face of the series. Ask your average anime fan what the hell a Precure is, and they'll point to this season. Heartcatch is the first season to get recommended when someone asks what Precure they should watch. Hell, the season's reputation was what got me watching this series in the first place. From an outsider's perspective, Heartcatch is the face of Precure. From an insider's perspective, though, Heartcatch represents the best of Precure, and it's because it represents the best that it ended up becoming the face. But how did it end up representing the best? Well, that's what this video's about. The appeal of this season can be broken down. Well, to use a nonsensical metaphor, it's like a double-layered cake. The icing is this season's cool new visual presentation and overall aesthetic, a welcome departure from the very similar designs of the previous seasons. The delicious inner filling, the most nebulous part to pin down, is made from the attitudes and voices of the creators and how their voices somehow manage to break through the heavily marketable mold that Precure is usually forced into, if only for a little while. The top layer is this season's cast, and how each character is wholly unique within the Precure canon. That is to say, they have few clear parallels to characters from previous seasons. And the bottom layer is a greater focus on narrative, keeping the balance between the slice-of-life moments and fights of the previous seasons, while still adopting an accelerated, more exciting pace. Together, these elements form a delicious dessert of a season, the taste of which, when eaten all together, is, well... So let's examine these layers and flavors, one by one, and see how they come together to form something delicious. Look, I know the icing on the cake metaphor is usually what you apply to the last thing you talk about, but in this case, I think it makes more sense to talk about the visuals as the icing first. Think about it. When you look at a cake, the first thing you're likely to notice about it is its icing, what color it is, if it's got any shapes or anything, and so on. Now, what's the first thing anyone's bound to notice about Heartcatch Precure? Heartcatch Precure is, no contest, the best looking season of Precure thus far. Just from watching this video, the reasons why should be all too apparent. And just in case that wasn't clear, a side-by-side comparison with previous seasons should speak volumes. The overall art direction is easy on the eyes. On top of that, this season's character designs are dope, and the characters themselves are super expressive. And naturally, this season has the highest quantity of great fight animation yet. So, how about them character designs? They're a clear departure from the designs of every previous season, all of which look kind of samey. The character designs have been simplified yet stylized. There's less focus on extraneous details, and more focus on easy-to-animate designs with colors that pop. The simpler designs allow for more fluid animation, while the bright colors still provide eye candy in more static scenes. Together, that means these characters are never boring to look at, But what really sells these characters is their expressiveness. In previous seasons, the characters' faces were static a lot of the time. I'm not saying they weren't ever expressive, but more often than not, they stuck with a handful of facial expressions per scene, if that. In Heartcatch though, well, hold on to your butts, cause we're not in Kansas anymore. This assault of expressiveness is a major part of what makes the characters so fun to watch. The sheer mass of them means that there's always fun just around the corner, and each of the expressions being unique and crazy as they are helps to make the characters livelier and more believable. This may be the most cartoony Precure has ever been, yet it's that very cartoonishness that makes these characters feel so believable. You know, on top of their bubbly personalities and personal dramas and what have you, but we'll get to those later. For now, we've got one more important aspect of the visuals that any discussion of Precure can't go without mentioning: the fight scenes. This series as a whole continues to ride that trend of an ever-increasing quantity of great fight scenes. While I can't say that any one fight from this season outshines the best from Fresh, the sheer amount of Sakuga on display in this season more than makes up for that. Rarely did an episode pass where the fight animation was skimped out on. In past seasons, it was very clear when one episode's fight received less attention or priority than another's. In Heartcatch though, every fight felt almost equally developed, worked on. They all had a similar amount of effort put in, is what I'm saying, as opposed to putting all the effort into one and leaving the others to dry. As a result, no fight is boring. I ended up looking forward to all of them, and was rarely disappointed. And on top of the fight scenes, the art style, and expressiveness, the one element of this season's visual presentation that I found the most surprising was its utilization of visual metaphors. Previous seasons really didn't have a lot in the way of that. Almost none, really, unless you want to count the clover from Fresh, blunt as that was. And I'm not saying Heartcatch isn't blunt about it, but it's at least a little more poignant. Here's just one example. At the end of episode 8, one of the main characters, Erika, is having a friendly chat with their sister, while in the background, main protag Tsubomi is cranking the Magic MacGuffin merchandisable toy thing. The whole episode's been about the sisterly bond between these two, and here at the end, once they finally rekindled their bond after an episode's worth of struggles, they walk off into the sunset together, side by side. Hard cut to this. Did you see what they did there? They took the fake-looking plot device plastic toy merchandise thing that's shoehorned into every season, not so much shoehorned in as a primary reason why the series exists to sell toys. They took the show's primary marketing gimmick and turned it into a visual metaphor for a growing bond between sisters. Damn. Approaching this from an outside perspective, you might understandably think that a bit simplistic, and it is, but here's the thing. This here is more than any previous season presented. This here is evidence of a level of care being put into the seemingly simplest of ideas that before now simply wasn't present. And speaking of the plastic merchandise, I think it's finally time I addressed that. Precure is an extended commercial for children's toys. This should be apparent to anyone who watches the show long enough to see these CG, plastic-looking, important plot things that pop up in every episode. They're toys, always made to be fiddled and played with in some unnecessarily elaborate way to facilitate kids messing around with all the moving parts and then losing them so parents have to go buy more. These things always stick out like a sore thumb because the CG they're constructed with never matches the aesthetic of the rest of the show. They are there to sell toys, and they'll always be there, whether or not they actually belong. Once you notice this, it can have a detrimental effect on your viewing experience. You'll be watching some serious stuff go down when suddenly something glaringly out of place pops up on screen, and you can hear in the back of your head, $19.99 at your local Toys R Us. I only bring all this up now because Heartcatch Precure almost had the best take on these CG toys before being forced back into being a commercial. Watching the first few episodes of Heartcatch, you almost got a sense that the creators behind this iteration were just as sick of this toy shit they were forced to shove in as any sane adult watching along with their kids would be, sighing as they break out their wallets while their kids scream, "I want that one too!" Heartcatch's unique take on this that made me bring all this up is this. This is how these purchasable toy MacGuffins are presented time and time again in the first few episodes. Did you catch that? Here, let me play that again with the proper sound effect. Yes. Oh yes! For a little bit, one of the most important mass-produced toy bits included with your Heartcatch set, only $35.99, is consistently shat into existence by one of the fairies. This, to me, reads as the creators saying that all this toy shit they're obligated to include is, indeed, just a bunch of shit. And even if that wasn't the intention, I would like to believe it is. This is the delicious filling of this Precure cake. To put it broadly, the creators had a vision for where they wanted to take this season, and their voices pierced through the corporate nature of this show's production in their wonderfully weird creative choices this season, as exemplified by everything about the season's visual presentation, and especially the poop. Now that I think about it, who the hell was behind this madness anyway? Time to Google it. Looking at the staff this season, it's no wonder everything feels different. Returning major staff from the previous season include the music composer, and that's it. The director, Tatsuya Nagamine, has worked on Precure before, but never at the helm of a season. The character designer is new to Precure, known for Mushishi, classic Berserk, and My Hero Academia, all of which look very different character design-wise, so it's interesting to see that the same guy was behind all of them. And the writing staff! So you've got your head writer and various scriptwriters, right? Of all of them, only one is a veteran, and he's just a normal scriptwriter. Everyone else, including the head writer, is fresh blood. If you ever wanted to know why this season felt so different, why the creators tried to get away with some really weird stuff, this is it. Most of them were new, and had ideas running wild in their heads that they just had to get out. Ideas like shitting out the marketing gimmick. But, alas, we aren't allowed to have nice things, so that hilarious, small, pooping detail didn't last. Soon into this season's run, the pooping animation was replaced with a toy bit just popping into existence, which saddens me deeply. I'd like to imagine that the executives at Toei saw this animation play for the first time as it aired on TV, and themselves shat their pants in a panic, worried that kids wouldn't want a toy if they thought it was poop, and called up the animation staff and demanded they change it so that they could sell more toys. Creative intent be damned. I have no way of knowing whether this is the truth. The English-translated Precure staff interviews seem to be almost non-existent, but that's how it reads to me. Marketing and toy selling taking priority over creative vision. Now that's a load of shit. But let's not linger on the sad effects of capitalism on creative integrity. This is a fun show after all, and I want to keep having fun, so let's discuss some more fun. Now, I know it's been a bit, but you know how, a while ago, I was talking about how expressive these characters are? Their expressiveness is part of what makes them so fun, but this silliness ain't all for show. The goofy expressions, which would be fun enough on their own, are simply one facet of the most fleshed out characters in the Precure canon. The main characters of Heartcatch Precure are, simply put, wonderful, and together make up the top layer of this Precure cake of ours. The first thing of note about them is that they're all quite different from all their predecessors. In fact, unlike every previous season, no character this season has a clear parallel character in any other season, which went a long way towards making these girls memorable. We'll explore that facet a little bit more in depth as we look at each character in turn. First, we have the main protagonist, Tsubame Hanasaki. Tsubame is quite the departure from the rest of the Precure leads. Up until now, the main protagonists of each season, Nagisa, Saki, Nozomi, and Love, have all been loud, energetic doofuses, for lack of a better term. Most of them were athletic, and all of them were infectiously cheery. Absolutely none of that applies to Tsubame. She's quiet, shy, physically weak, and has much less in the way of constant, never-ending cheer. This girl spent a lot more time wallowing in self-pity than any previous Precure lead, and all of that is what makes her so great. Unlike every past lead, Tsubame's story is all about gaining self-confidence. From the onset, she's labeled as the weakest ever Precure, which is a crippling label to attach to someone who already has confidence issues. Watch out for that tree! In a way, this makes Tsubame the ideal lead for a show like this. Let's not mince words here. At the end of the day, this is a show for little girls. Girls grow up facing tremendous societal pressures that I, as a guy, can barely comprehend. They're told they're weak, and that they have roles they're expected to slot into, and here you have a heroine going through that same sort of deal, albeit with a superpowered twist. She's constantly told she's weak, told to give up and do something else, but she doesn't. In spite of being constantly told how weak she is, she learns to stand up for herself and show that no, she's not weak. She's just as strong as everyone else. And that makes her, I think, the most inspirational figure that this series has ever produced. Someone just like the viewer who, despite their weaknesses, stands up for themselves and comes out stronger for it. Now that's dope. Next we have Tsubomi's best friend, Erika Kurumi. She's got all the energy of every previous main protagonist and then some, and is the source of a huge share of this season's wacky facial expressions and general fun. Unlike past seasons, this season recognizes that having the most energetic character front and center most of the time risks being exhausting. Thus, though still a main character, Erika is mercifully given the secondary main character status, which helps to give viewers time to breathe in between her antics. That's not to say I don't love her, though. The sheer amount of energy packed into this tiny little package alone makes her a joy to watch. She can make even the wildest situations fun. For example, I love how in the middle of the multi-episode climax she can just yell for a timeout, and all the baddies just go along with it. It's great. But Erika's not all just wild fun times. There is a little nuance behind that deranged grin. Erika is a girl who grew up in her sister's shadow, a sister who already has a successful career, adoring fans, and bears a striking resemblance to Miki from Fresh Precure. They even have the same job. I mean, what's up with that? This resulted in a lot of confusing emotions building up inside of her. She's jealous of her sister for being more successful than Erika thinks herself capable of, and she's spiteful of her sister's job and fans for taking all of her sister's time. Erika expresses these feelings by acting out, forcing herself on others, and generally being a loud, attention-seeking nuisance. This may result in her being perceived as obnoxious, but it's all in service of her just wanting to be closer to her sister. From there, her arc is a fairly straightforward, family is important, talk about your feelings sort of deal, but through it all, Erika's obnoxious levels of smile keep everything lighthearted and fun. She's got the most raw fun packed into her of any Precure lead, which helps to balance out the relative seriousness lent to the stories of the other characters. Speaking of which, Itsuki Myodoin, the surprise third cure. Now, before I say anything possibly controversial about her, let me first say that I really do like her. Her arc is about coming to terms with one's likes and habits versus one's self-image, and learning that it's okay to be yourself in spite of what others might think of you. That's all shit I can get behind. However, there are implications with Itsuki's arc that are a little, off-putting to me. Itsuki is introduced as, by the strictest definition of the word, a tomboy, or a girl who behaves in a manner usually considered boyish. She wears her school's boys' uniform, is the heir to her grandfather's martial arts dojo, and is the student council president. Hell, even Tsubomi crushes on Itsuki, thinking she's a guy, but that doesn't mean she's a wholly unfeminine character who wants to be a boy or anything. She just expresses her gender differently is all. At least, that's the impression her initial appearance gives. That impression doesn't quite hold out. See, how she ends up developing gets me scratching my head. Conceptually, I'm down for someone learning to freely express their gender, but the specific way Itsuki's arc of learning to express herself is presented makes me think that the writers or creators or whoever had different, potentially less helpful ideas about Itsuki and her situation. See, by the end of the show, she's gone from being student council president to not, and from sporting a unique androgynous look to something that leans heavily in one direction. Her changes are brought about not just by others encouraging her to be herself, but by them telling her to specifically be more girly.
とっても似合ってるよ。
お兄様。
それが本当のItsukiなんだね。
So, why do I take issue with this? To me, this all communicates a not-so-good message. Itsuki is not allowed to just be a tomboy, which, fair, you don't want your characters to be shallow, but the way other characters treated her and facilitated her change gives the impression that they just assumed she was hiding her girly nature, for lack of a better term. She's a tomboy, and therefore the characters and writers assume must secretly really want to do girly things. I mean, what girl wouldn't want to do all the cute dresses and stuff? It's not enough to simply have a tomboy who embraces her identity and uses it to make the most out of life. No, she's a girl, and girls have to embody stereotypically feminine traits, right? This season takes a non-typical female character and rolls back her unique traits until she more easily fits within the group. And that's sad, on top of being a poor message to communicate to the target audience. An audience that consists, mind you, of little girls. It risks communicating to them that what happens to Itsuki is normal and expected of them. It risks discouraging them from expressing themselves in ways that are not typically feminine by telling them that even boyish girls are really very girly on the inside. That's not a message I would want any kid to hear. I would want them to be free to express themselves, not limited by what a show or society says is expected of them. And I know everything I just said probably made a lot of you watching very, confused. A lot of you probably disagree. Maybe even I made someone mad. Gee, I hope not. So now that I've said all that, let me dump on you an assload of qualifiers. At the end of the day, this is still Precure. This is a show whose original leads were a jock and a science nerd, roles not usually prescribed to women until far too recently. This is a show that stars girls who fight giant monsters and save the world on a regular basis. Again, atypical roles for girls. The characters in this show have been, for the most part, incredibly positive role models for girls. Role models that show that it is okay to embody traits that are typically seen as gender exclusive. But that's not what Itsuki's arc does. It sends the message that girls can't be just wholly boyish if they want. Itsuki's changes are narratively justified in this show, so you can argue that her changes make sense for her, but that does not change the fact that a potentially cool role model was changed into someone who may embody more harmful ideas about the roles of girls, and that honestly bothers me. Or hell, maybe I'm just annoyed because the exact same storyline cropped up in the world God only knows. Like literally, one girl in that show goes through the exact same arc as Itsuki does, almost beat for beat. It's downright uncanny. Though at least in that show, KUSUNOKI KASUGA, the aforementioned girl, doesn't have to sacrifice any of her non-feminine traits in the process of realizing that it's okay to display her feminine side. Fuck. Man. That shit was hard to write. You know, I want to be wrong about all that, I really do. I want the reality to be that the intent was simply to reinforce the general message of Precure that it's okay for masculine and feminine traits to coexist in one person regardless of their sex, but I can't shake the feeling that, regardless of intent, the character of Itsuki may only have reinforced stereotypical girls' roles instead of subverting them. And it's really weird that this exists in Precure of all things. Please, someone... anyone out there, if you have a counter-argument, please throw it at me. I think I need it. Oh dear, that was quite the possibly controversial, definitely negative tangent. Let's get back into a positive headspace, shall we? It's time for Yuri Tsukikage, the most straightforward badass in Precure. The biggest thing of note about Yuri is that she, to a greater extent than any other character in the series, has had to deal with and overcome horrible, crippling failure. See, this season opens with her failing. Her fairy gets killed, though we don't know that for a while.
Start? I don't feel so good.
And the big tree the Cures are tasked with protecting this time around is mostly destroyed. For the first chunk of the season, we're not even sure she survived. When we do find out she's alive, she's consumed with guilt over failing to do her duty and getting a friend killed. She's reluctant to become a Cure again because she thinks she doesn't deserve it. The lesson imbued into the character arc of Yuri Tsukikage, like many a lesson in this series, is simple yet effective. Don't let guilt consume you. It's not wrong to feel bad about your mistakes, but don't wallow in them. Instead, learn from them and grow. Move on. and become a better person for having made those mistakes. Yuri only comes out of her guilt-ridden stupor when she realizes that saving her friends and the world has nothing to do with her feeling bad about messing up once. If someone's a good friend, they will welcome you back with open arms. And really, what else do you need? While we're here, real quick, you see all those people over there? Those are two of this season's villains, Professor Sabak and Dark Precure. And they're pretty cool characters too, fit quite nicely in this character cake layer thing here, yeah. When it comes to villains, I can't exactly claim that Heartcatch Precure has the strongest set of any Precure season. You've got only the two remotely interesting ones, and the rest are either wacky but flat, or... oh, come on, didn't we do this already? But I don't really care to linger on those guys. Let's try to stay positive and see how cool these two are. Well, to be quite honest, for most of the season, Professor Sabak and Dark Precure are just menacing figures off in the distance that occasionally pop up. We don't see much of them, and aren't given much reason to care about them. There is the occasional hint, but nothing you'd pick up on unless you already knew what to look for. Most of the intrigue about them comes about during the multi-episode finale, and oh boy, what a ride that makes for. So, here's a bombshell. Professor Sabak is unique within the Precure canon in that he's the only villain, thus far, with a personal connection to one of the main cast. Previous seasons have had some villains become friends with the main characters, but none of them have been Akira's dad. Again, throughout most of the show, Professor Sabak is just a bad guy, with only vague hints about his true nature being dropped here and there. But once the reveal does come in, it does lend him and the scenes he's in some much-needed poignancy. While the reveal was a little muddled by the show dropping an ass-load of very obvious hints just before it happened, the heartfelt scenes between Yuri and her dad that followed more than made up for it. They're the best family drama that Precure has ever produced. Or I should say the only good family drama. And then there's Dark Precure, who comes packaged with the strongest drive to do what she does of any Precure villain. As the puppet daughter of the evil mind-controlled Sabak, she's basically Pinocchio, but bad. Not only did she want to help her father, but she wanted to evolve beyond her artificial self and be real. It's only due to the environment she was made in that she came to believe that killing off the girl she was based on was the only way to become real. In that sense, her whole existence is a tragedy. An imperfect reproduction of the daughter her father left behind. In the end, she couldn't be Sabak's real daughter, but he treated her like one. Oh yeah, and she just straight up dies.
Start? I don't feel so good.
And so does Sabak for that matter. Yeah, that went dark real fast there. So yeah, overall pretty strong cast. I might have my odd contentions with Itsuki, but overall the girls were a fun group to hang with, and even the villains got a little nuance. The cures are each fun on their own, and the ways they conflict yet harmonize with each other make for both fun times and compelling drama. It's also worth noting that this isn't just a strong group dynamic here. Initially, this show was built on a strong relationship between just a pair, a la the first few seasons. What starts as a strong pair over the course of the season grows into a strong group, which leads nicely into the bottom layer of this Precure cake. Heartcatch has the best pacing and overall narrative structure of any season of Precure thus far. Basically, this time around, there's a greater number of episodes where important plot things happen. As a result, there's a sense of momentum present this season not felt previously. Precure usually maintains a healthy balance between slice-of-life antics and Monster of the Week battles, but rarely do any of those antics or battles have any bearing on the narrative or characters. Here, though, they interact with each other, and as a result, the average episode winds up feeling just a little bit more important. For instance, the introduction and fleshing out of the main characters is more spread out. In previous seasons, every girl was introduced and made a cure very near the start of the season. Here, though, a character's introduction and their becoming a cure do not necessarily correlate. Main character Tsubomi naturally becomes a cure in the first episode, but her best friend and second main character Erika doesn't become a cure until episode 3. Allowing plenty of time for the show to flesh out their relationship before piling on the Precure stuff on top of it. Itsuki is introduced in episode 3, but only becomes Cure Sunshine in episode 23. The benefit of this was that it allows her becoming a cure to act as the climax of all the drama that had been building around her, which is much more satisfying than a simple, oh, she's a cure immediately now. Saw that coming. And then it's a whole 10 episodes after that before Yuri returns as Cure Moonlight. Wait, sorry, I mean... Similar to Itsuki, her return is the culmination of all of her drama, so yeah, that's cool. As a result of spreading out the joining of the team members like this, there's a lot more episodes in the interim that deal with drama or plot stuff directly related to the main characters. Big character moments are built up to over numerous episodes instead of happening very quickly. Because of all that, this season had a momentum to it that kept me much more engaged with it than I had been with any previous season. Sure, there were still some dull filler episodes here and there, but for once in this show's lifetime, they were an outright minority, which is a blessing. It also helps that even episodes that appear to be filler from the outset will turn out to have some important bearing on the main characters every once in a while. Like, you'll start watching an episode, and it'll just seem like some random slice of life and Monster of the Week stuff, right? Previous seasons usually had a pretty hard divide between character-centric, slice-of-life fun times, and Monster of the Week brawls. Occasionally, the character drama and weekly fights would overlap, but not often. So it'd be natural to assume that they'd be just as disconnected in this season, but that's where you'd be wrong! Not only do the weekly monster brawls now have their own B-plots attached to them, but those plots usually relate to drama affecting the main characters of that episode. Like in episode 4, Tsubomi is woeful about being weak and fears that she makes a poor partner for Erika. She grows paranoid that Erika might leave her for someone else. Running in parallel to this, one half of a tennis duo is feeling down about her skills and feels her partner might leave her for someone else. It's only through these two plotlines intersecting that they can reach their resolutions. Both Tsubomi and the tennis girl are able to realize, through observing the other making the same mistakes that they are, that they're being silly, and both of them are then able to talk it out with their significant others. This all is cool because running these plots in parallel to each other and having them intersect gives them each added weight. It allows the show to flesh out the people and world around the main characters while still making it all directly relevant to them. It's easy to imagine a previous season taking this sort of episode and not pulling it off. Structurally, side and main plots rarely connected, so if this episode were part of a previous season, it's likely that Tsubomi and Erika wouldn't have had anything going on. They would have been getting along just fine while the side plot happened, and then they would have solved it with a fight and a friendship speech, and nothing would have been gained for the main characters. Simply put, it would have been filler. But because Tsubomi and Erika were made to go through a parallel story, a seemingly filler episode turns out to be part of each character's personal growth, and that's cool. And everything's cool. Heartcatch is the best Precure in every conceivable aspect. It's the most visually stimulating season, this season where the creative voices of the staff were the loudest, its characters were mostly fantastic, and all changed dramatically over the show's run, and the pacing and structure of the season kept me more engaged than I ever have been with the series. It's delicious. Just like cake! And I find myself very much doubting that any future season will top this, but I guess there's no way to find that out until I get there. This is it for now, but one day, the journey will continue. Thanks for sitting through my ramblings about a children's magical cartoon show. Leave a comment here, or at me on Twitter if you have something to say. Believe it or not, I still enjoy getting responses, even though I know this time around the responses are probably... There's gonna be a discussion in the comments, let me tell ya. Oh boy, Itsuki. I don't know at what point I'll get to the next season, but I will. Eventually. In the meantime, I'm cooking up a really big video that's due out within the next 2 months. It's about video games, very relevant, so stick around for that, please. And I've got one last crazy thing for those few of you who stuck around to the end. I'm gonna do that YouTuber thing where I engage my audience, or whatever. So if this video gets, say, 5,000 views within a month of its upload date, I'll make a video about one anime of a viewer's choice. Just leave whatever show you want in the comments, and please keep it under 30 episodes. I'll sort through shows that get at least 100 upvotes. Say maybe for my small channel size that's asking a bit much, but you know what, we'll see. I'll probably fudge the numbers later anyway. So yeah, there's that. So that's everything. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you later. By the way, I actually hate cake.